There are moments in life when the veil between earth and eternity begins to thin. Moments when the soul feels something the mind cannot explain. Moments when heaven leans closer, not with fear, not with darkness, but with a whisper that says, "Your journey is shifting. Your story is nearing its sacred completion." These are not moments of terror. These are moments of transition. Holy moments, quiet moments. Moments when God begins preparing a heart for the world beyond this one. Before we continue, please subscribe and be part of our ministry. For some, these signs appear softly, like a gentle tug on the spirit. For others, they come as a deep awareness that life is being wrapped in a new kind of grace. And if you pay attention, if you listen with your spirit instead of your ears, you will recognize them. You will sense the pull of eternity. You will feel heaven calling you closer. Because death is not the end for a child of God, it is the completion of a journey, the fulfillment of a promise, the doorway into glory. So before fear tries to speak, before confusion tries to rise, let me show you the 7 biblical signs that heaven may be preparing your spirit for home. Number 1, a sudden, unexplainable peace begins to rest over your spirit. There are moments in life when something begins to shift inside you long before anything shifts around you. The world may still be loud, your responsibilities may still be heavy, your questions may still be unanswered, yet deep inside your spirit, a softness begins to form. A calm begins to settle. A stillness rises up from a place you did not touch, a place you did not create. It is not the kind of peace you feel on your best day. It is not the kind of comfort that comes from good news or relief from stress. This peace is different. It is unexplainable. It is sacred. It comes quietly, yet carries a weight that cannot be dismissed. A presence so steady, it feels as if something holy is wrapping itself around your soul. This kind of peace is not the peace of the world. It is not temporary. It is not fragile. It does not depend on the conditions of your life. It does not rise and fall with your emotions. It does not crumble when your circumstances shift. This peace stands firm. It comes from heaven, not earth. It is the kind of peace that Scripture speaks about, the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that guards your heart and mind, even when your human senses cannot make sense of it. And when death is nearing, when heaven is preparing to draw someone home, this peace becomes one of the first and clearest signs. Heaven begins whispering to the spirit long before the body knows its time is short. It isn't a peace that silences all questions. It's a peace that sits with you while you ask them. It doesn't erase your humanity, it comforts it. It doesn't deny your emotions, it lifts them. This peace feels like a gentle hand resting on your chest, steadying the places that used to tremble. It feels like a quiet strength filling the chambers of your heart, calming the fears you once struggled to silence. There is a sense that something greater than you is drawing near, something eternal, something loving, something beyond the limitations of this world. And even if you don't fully understand it, part of your spirit recognizes it. This peace is a visitor from heaven. It comes in phases. First, it settles over your thoughts. You begin noticing that the things which used to agitate you no longer affect you the same way. You react slower. You breathe deeper. You reflect more than you complain. You feel a detachment, not from life, but from earthly frustrations. Then the peace begins to settle into your emotions. Hurt feels lighter. Fear loses its grip. Anxiety softens. The rush of life slows down. You become more aware of the present moment, more grateful for small details, more contemplative about what truly matters. And then, as the peace deepens, it settles over your spirit. You feel held, even in solitude. You feel watched over, even in silence. You feel guided, even without full clarity. This is heaven, preparing your soul for transition. When heaven is calling someone home, it does not frighten the spirit. it comforts it. The calm that comes is not resignation, it is revelation. It is the spirit recognizing that it is nearing the edge of the temporal world and standing closer to the eternal one. People often describe this peace as feeling like everything is going to be all right without knowing exactly why they feel it. They say, "I feel calm," even when nothing around them has changed. They say, "I'm not afraid anymore," even though fear once lived loudly in their minds. They say, "I feel ready," even if their body is still fighting. Peace becomes the language of heaven entering the human heart. This kind of peace also reconciles things within you. Old grudges loosen their grip. Old wounds no longer feel sharp. You begin to forgive more easily. You begin to release burdens you once held tightly. You begin to see people differently, softer, more compassionately, with more grace. There is a cleansing that comes with this peace, a purification, a quiet sorting of what mattered and what never did. You start letting go, not out of defeat, but out of clarity. Your spirit is making room for eternity. Even those who never spoke of faith begin to feel this peace when heaven draws close. It does not discriminate. It does not only visit the strong believers, it visits those whose hearts have been searching without knowing what they were searching for. It visits those who felt alone. It visits those who questioned. Peace becomes the bridge between earth and heaven, the gentle whisper that says, "You are not walking this next part alone." For some, this peace arrives in the final weeks. For others, the final days. And for a few, it may come even earlier. But whenever it comes, it is unmistakable. It softens the atmosphere around the individual. Rooms feel quieter, conversations feel slower. The person begins speaking with more depth, more sincerity, more purpose. Their eyes seem to look beyond the moment, as if seeing something unseen. Their presence carries a stillness that others notice even if they cannot explain it. This peace does not silence sorrow, but it transforms it. It makes room for acceptance. It allows love to speak louder than fear. This peace is one of the greatest gifts heaven gives before calling someone home. It removes the sting of fear. It prepares the heart. It steadies the mind. It opens the spirit. And it introduces the individual to the reality that death, for the believer, is not an ending. It is an entry into rest, an entry into glory, an entry into the fullness of the presence of God. So when this peace begins to overshadow a person's life, when it arrives without explanation, when it settles on them in moments that don't make sense, when it becomes heavier than their earthly worries, it is not random, it is not psychological, it is spiritual. It is heaven speaking in the softest yet clearest language the Spirit understands. It is God saying, "Do not be afraid, I am near." And when heaven comes near, peace always follows. Number 2, old burdens, grudges, and wounds begin to release from you effortlessly. There comes a moment near the edge of eternity when something begins to shift inside a person in a way that cannot be explained by logic, counseling, or time. It is not the slow, emotional healing we spend years chasing. It is something deeper, quieter, and strangely effortless, like a spiritual loosening of chains that once felt welded to the soul. When heaven begins calling a person home, the weight they carried for decades suddenly begins to fall away, not because they tried harder, but because God begins preparing their spirit for a journey where those burdens cannot follow. It is as if the Father himself reaches gently into the heart and unties knots that therapy couldn't reach, friends couldn't fix, and time couldn't dissolve. You begin releasing old hurts without analyzing them. The bitterness that once rose whenever you thought of someone simply dissolves like mist under the morning sun. The anger that used to burn suddenly feels foreign, almost too heavy to hold on to. Memories that once controlled your breathing soften into something distant, something that no longer stings. You don't forget what happened, but the emotional grip loosens. And it is in that loosening that heaven reveals its presence. It is not that you no longer care, it's that you finally understand what matters in the light of eternity. As the soul nears transition, God often removes the burden of carrying unresolved pain. What once defined you no longer feels like your identity. The grudges that shaped your reactions lose their hold. You begin seeing people differently, not as enemies or sources of harm, but as fragile souls just trying to make it through their own storms. Compassion replaces resentment. Understanding replaces judgment. Softness replaces defensiveness. It is not weakness, it is preparation. Heaven does not operate in bitterness, and so God begins cleansing the heart of everything that cannot cross the threshold with you. People near the end often speak of sudden forgiveness, of moments where they feel compelled to reach out, reconcile, or bless people they once vowed never to speak to again. They are not doing this to be nice. They are doing this because their spirit has already started walking into a realm where forgiveness is the natural language. They begin to feel the truth of eternity pressing into their hearts, reminding them that grudges lose their meaning in the presence of God. When you are inches from eternity, you begin to see life differently. The things that once seemed unforgivable now feel small. The wounds that once felt unbearable now feel healed in ways no human effort could have accomplished. It is not always a verbal reconciliation. Sometimes the release happens quietly, in the unseen places. The person sits alone and whispers, "I let it go." They revisit old memories and feel peace instead of pain. They think of people who hurt them and feel sorrow instead of anger. Their heart becomes lighter, freer, more open. This is not coincidence. This is mercy. This is heaven preparing a soul for the purity of God's presence. Wounds are not carried into eternity. So God, in his tenderness, begins to strip them away before the journey. Even unresolved grief begins to lose its sharpness. The ache of losing someone softens, not because the loss no longer matters, but because eternity begins to reshape the meaning of separation. The person begins sensing that reunion is no longer a hope, it is a promise. And that promise dissolves the sting of grief. They begin to feel as though the veil between them and their loved ones has thinned. They feel near to what once felt distant. Heaven is drawing closer, and all the wounds tied to earthly separation begin to melt into peace. In these moments, the soul begins to understand that the greatest wounds of life were never meant to define the person, but were meant to shape compassion, depth, and understanding. Once that purpose is fulfilled, the wounds are released. The spirit does not cling to what no longer serves it. The closer a soul comes to stepping into eternity, the less it wants to carry. Anything heavy becomes unnecessary. Anything bitter becomes foreign. Anything painful becomes incompatible with the presence calling them forward. And there is a holiness to that release, a sacredness in watching someone who spent years suffering under memories suddenly breathe freely. Their face softens, their voice quiets, their posture relaxes. It is like watching a soul shed weights that were never theirs to carry alone. You begin to see glimpses of who they were before the pain, glimpses of childlike gentleness returning, glimpses of spiritual clarity rising. They are not going backward, they are moving upward. Heaven is reintroducing them to their truest self. Sometimes the release is not gentle, it is sudden. A moment arrives where the person simply decides they are done carrying something, not out of exhaustion, but out of revelation. The burden that once demanded their energy suddenly feels invisible. They feel lighter, freer, unbound. The spiritual realm has begun its work, cutting ties that kept their soul anchored to earthly weight. This kind of release does not come from human strength. It comes from divine intervention. When heaven calls, heaven heals. Shame also begins to dissolve. The mistakes of the past, the failures, the regrets, they lose their grip. The person no longer carries the heaviness of everything they think they did wrong. Instead, they begin to understand grace in ways they never could before. Grace stops being a concept and becomes a covering, a warmth, a truth they can finally feel deeply. They begin to see that God was never holding their failures against them. And when that revelation lands, shame evaporates. It is impossible for shame to cling to a soul being drawn toward glory. This release is not merely emotional, it is spiritual. Something sacred unfolds in the unseen. Angels who have walked with the person through their life begin to help them lay down each burden, one after another. The atmosphere around them shifts. Peace fills the places where resentment once lived. Light fills the places where wounds once festered. Freedom fills the places where pain once settled. The soul becomes lighter, brighter, clearer. This is one of the clearest signs that heaven is calling. When death approaches in the way God intends, not as tragedy, but as transition, the heart begins to empty itself of every weight. The person is not dying emotionally, they are awakening spiritually. They are stepping into a new clarity. They are shedding earthly heaviness so their spirit can rise without resistance. And while the world might think they are letting go, heaven knows they are being lifted. They feel it in the quiet moments. They feel it in the softening of their heart. They feel it in the sudden ease of forgiveness. They feel it in the way wounds stop hurting. A divine hand is touching their soul, releasing what they carried, preparing them for a realm where no bitterness, no heartbreak, no burden can enter. It is not the end. It is preparation. It is heaven making room for a soul that is about to come home. Number 3, you start sensing God's presence in unusual intensity, especially in the quiet. There comes a point in a person's journey toward eternity when the veil between this world and the next begins to thin, and the nearness of God becomes almost tangible. It is not something you can force. It is not something you can manufacture. It simply begins to happen to you. His presence, which once felt like a gentle whisper you strained to hear, now begins to surround you, wrap around you, rest on you with a heaviness that is not burdensome but holy. It is a presence that follows you into the silence, meets you in the stillness, and lingers long after your eyes open in the early morning. It is as if heaven begins leaning closer, watching over your spirit with a tenderness that cannot be mistaken for anything else. This intensified presence of God is not loud. It does not demand your attention. It does not rise with force. It comes quietly, like light entering a darkened room, not rushing, not exploding, just slowly filling the empty spaces until everything feels touched by something sacred. People nearing the end of their earthly journey often describe moments when the room feels different, as though they are no longer sitting alone. They say the air feels softer, the atmosphere feels warm, the silence feels alive. They feel held, seen, and known. This is the presence of God drawing nearer. When heaven is calling you, God's presence begins to rest on your spirit in a way that you cannot ignore. You may find yourself sitting in a quiet room and suddenly feeling a peace that seems to spread through your body from the inside out. You may wake in the middle of the night, not with fear or confusion, but with a sense of being gently watched over. You may feel tears rise not because you are sad, but because something holy is brushing against your soul. It is not emotional. It is spiritual. It is the presence of the one who has been with you your entire life, making himself known in a new and deeper way. This increased sense of his nearness often appears in the quiet moments, the spaces where the noise of life cannot drown him out. You may sit alone and feel a warmth on your chest, a sense of comfort that does not belong to anything or anyone in the physical world. You may close your eyes and sense that you are not closing them into darkness, but into a presence that feels like home. The quiet becomes a sanctuary. The stillness becomes a meeting place. The silence becomes a doorway to something eternal. People nearing transition sometimes describe seeing flashes of light that are not harsh, not disturbing, but beautiful. Moments where they sense movement in the room, even though nothing visible is happening. They describe feeling as though someone has entered the space, though no footsteps are heard. They describe sensing love in a way they have never felt before. Gentle, overwhelming, unmistakably divine. These experiences are not hallucinations. They are not illusions. They are reminders. They are invitations. They are heaven's way of signaling that the spiritual world is drawing near. When God's presence intensifies, fear begins to lose its hold. The unknown begins to feel familiar. Death begins to lose its sting. There is a recognition deep in the spirit, a recognition that this presence is the same one that comforted you during sleepless nights, carried you through heartbreaks, protected you from dangers you never saw, and whispered truth into your darkest valleys. It is a presence you have known your whole life, but now you recognize it more clearly because the noise that once distracted you has begun to fade. It is as though your spirit knows where it is going before your mind catches up. In this season, your conversations with God feel different. You do not speak as someone trying to reach him. You speak as someone who is already sitting with him. Words flow not out of desperation, but out of closeness. You may find yourself talking to him as naturally as breathing. There is no formality, no hesitation, no distance, just communion. You may begin to feel him answer you not in words, but in knowing, in peace, in warmth. You may sense his responses deep within you, simple and clear, like impressions stamped onto your spirit. This is the nearness of a father preparing his child for the journey home. There is also a softening that happens when his presence intensifies. You become more aware of beauty around you. You notice small things, a breeze, a ray of sunlight, the sound of a voice, and something inside you stirs with gratitude. You feel love more deeply. You forgive more easily. You see people with tenderness. This is not sentimentality. It is the presence of God expanding your heart, preparing you to step into the fullness of his love without the limitations of earthly life. His nearness begins to peel away layers of hardness, pain, disappointment, and fear until only the essence of your soul remains, soft, open, ready. There are moments when the intensity of his presence feels like being wrapped in an invisible embrace. You may be lying down, eyes closed, when you feel something settle over you like a blanket. Not heavy, but protective. Not warm in temperature, but warm in spirit. A presence that feels familiar, comforting, eternal. Many describe this sensation moments before passing, but for those who sense it earlier, it is a gentle message. Heaven is not far. Heaven is not distant. Heaven is already reaching toward you. This increased awareness of God's presence also brings clarity. You begin to understand things that once confused you. You see your life differently. You recognize the ways he has been guiding you all along. The regrets that once troubled you begin to fade because his presence makes it clear that your life was not measured by perfection, but by relationship. In his presence, you feel forgiven. You feel accepted. You feel complete. You begin to sense that the story of your life makes more sense when seen from heaven's perspective. As the presence of God grows stronger, the things of this world lose their power to grip you. Material concerns fade. Old worries dissolve. Earthly attachments loosen. What matters begins to shift. You no longer cling to temporary things. because your spirit begins to hunger for what is eternal. You feel drawn toward the light, toward the peace, toward the love you sense pressing gently but steadily around you. This is not detachment, it is preparation. It is the soul awakening to its true home. When heaven is calling you, God does not leave you to walk toward eternity alone. He surrounds you with His presence. He fills your quiet moments with His nearness. He speaks to your spirit through peace. He comforts you through stillness. He prepares you through intimacy. And as His presence intensifies, you begin to realize something profound and beautiful. You are not stepping into the unknown. You are stepping into the one who has always been with you. His presence becomes the bridge, the comfort, the confirmation, the gentle hand guiding you from one realm into the next. And in that presence, fear fades, peace rises, and your spirit begins to understand what your heart has always longed for. Heaven is closer than you think. Number 4. You begin seeing life differently, valuing eternity more than earthly things. There comes a quiet shift in the human soul when heaven begins drawing a person closer, a shift that cannot be explained by age, circumstance, or emotion. It is not a moment of panic or dread. It is a soft awakening, a turning of the heart, a gentle reorientation of what truly matters. You begin to feel yourself loosening your grip on the world, not because you are tired of living, but because something deeper is calling you, something purer, something eternal, something that your spirit has always known, but your humanity has often overlooked. Things that once felt important begin to lose their urgency. Achievements that once seemed necessary no longer carry weight. The rush to prove, to acquire, to impress begins to fade. And in its place grows a quiet clarity that eternity is more real than the temporary walls surrounding your life. It is not that you stop loving people. It is that you begin loving them differently, more gently, more intentionally, more sincerely. You cherish conversations more deeply. You forgive faster. You speak kinder. The irritations that once stirred your emotions barely touch you now. The disappointments that once broke your heart no longer anchor themselves inside you. You begin to see that people are not permanent fixtures. They are souls passing through, just as you are. And with that understanding comes compassion you didn't even realize you had room for. You start valuing hearts over arguments, presence over agendas, connection over control. When heaven begins to whisper your name, your priorities rearrange themselves without you having to force them. You stop chasing things that drain you. You stop clinging to things that wounded you. You stop pouring energy into trying to fix what was never yours to repair. Your spirit begins to simplify itself. You want less, but feel more. You desire fewer things, but experience deeper meaning. This is not resignation. It is revelation. The revelation that eternity has always been the true home of your soul, and life on earth has always been the temporary hallway leading you there. Your eyes begin to see beyond time. You start recognizing the fragility of everything you once assumed would last forever. You look at your hands and realize they are temporary. You look at your possessions and understand they cannot cross the threshold with you. You look at your memories and see that even the most beautiful ones are just glimpses of a greater joy waiting for you. You begin to feel what Scripture means when it says you are a stranger and pilgrim on the earth. You were never built to stay. You were built to pass through, to touch lives, to fulfill purpose, to love deeply, and to return to the one who breathed life into your lungs. As eternity draws nearer, your soul becomes quieter. The need to argue fades. The desire to prove yourself dissolves. You feel yourself stepping into acceptance, not of defeat, but of divine timing. You realize that every moment you lived was a gift. Every person you loved was a blessing. Every tear you cried was a lesson. Every joy you held was a glimpse of heaven's promise. Things that once felt heavy now feel light. Things that once consumed your mind now release their grip. You begin to see your life as God sees it, in wholeness, not fragments, in purpose, not chaos, in completion, not fear. The awareness of eternity does not make you disconnected from life. It makes you more present than you have ever been. You begin savoring small moments, the way light comes through your window in the morning, the softness of someone's voice when they say your name, the warmth of a memory that rises unexpectedly. You begin seeing beauty in places you overlooked. You notice how precious time is, not because it is running out, but because it is meaningful. Every breath feels intentional. Every sunrise feels like a gift. Every act of kindness feels sacred. This shift is not sadness, it is preparation. When heaven draws near, it does not strip life of joy. It deepens the joy that remains. You begin to feel gratitude for even the hardships, because you recognize they shaped you into someone capable of understanding eternity. You start feeling thankful for every step, even the painful ones, because they led you closer to the person God intended you to become. You find yourself releasing regrets one by one, not because they are forgotten, but because they no longer hold power over you. You look at your life with softness instead of disappointment, grace instead of judgment. Heaven's nearness brings wisdom. You start investing your time differently. You want conversations that matter. You want moments that feel meaningful. You want relationships that bring peace. You want to make things right where they were wrong. You want to leave love where you once left silence. You want to give joy where you once held back. Your soul understands that love is the only thing you can take with you, the only thing that echoes beyond the grave. And so you give it freely. You begin to recognize that eternity is not far away. It is not a distant, unreachable place. It is closer than breath. It is wrapped around you, even now. And when heaven begins whispering your name, you feel that closeness. You sense that the veil between here and there is thinner than you once believed. You no longer fear it. You honor it. You welcome it. You trust it. Life becomes less about living forever and more about living well, about leaving peace instead of bitterness, about offering forgiveness instead of carrying resentment, about making memories rooted in love instead of fear. You want your final days to reflect the truth your soul finally understands, that everything on earth passes, but everything done in love lasts. As heaven draws near, your spirit becomes more aware of God's hand in every detail. You see purpose in moments you once dismissed. You recognize divine timing in events you once questioned. You begin to understand that nothing was wasted, nothing was random, nothing was forgotten. Your story has always been held by God, and now in these holy moments, you finally see it. This shift, this awakening, this clarity, this reorientation is not an ending. It is a preparation for home, and your spirit knows it. You feel eternity humming quietly beneath the surface of your days, calling you by name, not to steal your life, but to fulfill it. It is the gentle reminder that this world is temporary, but you are eternal. And when heaven calls, your heart begins to hear the melody long before your body follows. Number 5. You feel drawn to reconcile, bless others, or speak final words of wisdom. There comes a moment in a person's spiritual journey when the heart begins to understand what the mind has not yet spoken aloud. A moment when something inside whispers, "Make this right. Say what needs to be said. Bless those who walked with you." This pull does not come from guilt. It does not grow from fear. It rises from a deep awareness that time is no longer something to be wasted or taken lightly. It is as though eternity begins brushing against your spirit, softening the edges of pride, loosening the grip of stubbornness, and uplifting the desire to leave behind what truly matters: peace, love, blessing, and wisdom. When heaven begins calling a person home, reconciliation becomes a holy instinct. It is not forced, it is not demanded. It simply becomes clear that holding old wounds no longer makes sense. You begin to feel the heaviness of unspoken apologies. You feel the meaning behind words you've delayed saying. You feel the urgency to tie loose ends, not for the sake of closure alone, but for the sake of leaving Earth with nothing weighing your spirit. A quiet courage rises within you, urging you to forgive, to release, to reach out, to speak what has been sitting in your heart for far too long. In these moments, you begin to see people differently. The ones who hurt you no longer appear as enemies. They appear as humans who were also broken and learning. The ones you distanced yourself from no longer feel unworthy of reconnection. They feel like souls God placed in your life for a reason. The ones you love suddenly feel more precious, more fragile, more deeply connected to your story. Eternity has a way of softening the spirit, of reminding you that every breath shared was a gift, and every relationship was a piece of your purpose. You find yourself wanting to bless people, not with things, but with words that carry the weight of your spirit. Words that heal, words that plant seeds, words that remind them of their worth. It feels as though God places burning messages in your heart. Encouragement for someone who feels unseen, forgiveness for someone who carries guilt, wisdom for someone who is wandering, and love for someone who needs to hear it one more time. These blessings come not from desperation, but from divine clarity. You see life as a thread woven by purpose, and you want every person who touched that thread to feel the trace of God's love in your final words. Your desire to bless others becomes an act of worship. You find yourself praying silently for people you once walked away from. You bless those who never knew how much they meant to you. You release gratitude to those who shaped your character. You begin to see your entire story, every chapter, every wound, every joy, as something sacred. And from that place of understanding, you want to pour out everything good you still carry, leaving no gift unshared. You also feel the pull to share wisdom, not lectures or warnings, but the distilled truth of what life has taught you. Wisdom becomes simple, it becomes honest, it becomes full of grace. You want people to know what matters: faith over fear, love over pride, peace over chaos, eternity over temporary things. It is as if God is giving you the final words of your earthly chapter, words meant to live on after your body rests. This wisdom does not come from age alone, it comes from spiritual readiness. God places understanding in your heart that feels clearer, purer, deeper than anything you've known before. You may notice conversations shifting without effort. People come to you seeking advice without knowing why. They ask questions that open your heart. They linger near you because your presence feels different, gentler, wiser, wrapped in a quiet holiness, and you speak with a softness that surprises even you. The urgency is not rushed, it is purposeful. You are not trying to persuade anyone, you are simply offering what your spirit feels compelled to give. In this season, old conflicts begin to feel small. Arguments lose their sharpness. Grudges feel like shadows fading in the light. You no longer need to be right. You no longer need to defend your side of the story. All that matters is leaving behind peace. And in seeking peace with others, you begin to experience peace within yourself. Not forced peace, but a deep, cleansing release that makes your spirit lighter, almost as though heaven is helping you prepare for its atmosphere. There is also a sense of completion that accompanies reconciliation. Each apology spoken, each blessing offered, each piece of wisdom shared feels like a chapter closing properly. It feels like tying a knot at the end of a thread so that nothing unravels behind you. It is the soul's way of preparing to stand before God with nothing left undone, nothing left unsaid, nothing left unresolved that was within your power to mend. This pull to reconcile is not only for others, it is for you. It heals you. It frees you. It makes your transition from earth to eternity smooth and unburdened. When you forgive, weight lifts. When you ask for forgiveness, peace enters. When you bless others, joy rises. When you speak wisdom, purpose flourishes. These final acts of love shape your legacy in ways more powerful than any possession or achievement ever could. And heaven watches these moments with tenderness. Angels draw near when hearts soften. God smiles when reconciliation takes place. Eternity celebrates when peace is restored. You are not just preparing to leave earth, you are preparing to enter eternity with a spirit cleansed, healed, and whole. This process is not about death, it is about transition. It is about the spirit aligning itself with heaven's rhythm, mending earthly ties so it can rise freely into God's presence. So, if you ever feel this pull, this holy urge to make things right, to bless others, to share wisdom, do not ignore it. It is not random. It is not emotional impulse. It is the quiet whisper of heaven telling you that your heart is being prepared, your spirit is being refined. Your final chapter on earth is being shaped with grace, and every step you take toward reconciliation becomes a step toward eternity, wrapped in peace, wrapped in purpose, wrapped in God's unfailing love. Number 6. You begin feeling watched over, guarded or escorted, often sensing angels near. There comes a point in the journey toward eternity when the veil between this world and the next grows thin. So thin that your spirit begins to perceive what your eyes cannot yet see. It is not imagination. It is not fear. It is not a trick of the mind. It is a shift in the atmosphere around you, a spiritual nearness that wraps itself around your heart with a gentleness that cannot be explained. You begin to feel watched over, guarded, accompanied, as if you are no longer walking through life alone, but are being escorted step by step by a presence that carries heaven in its breath. This sensation does not come as a jolt. It comes quietly. It comes softly. It comes in moments when you least expect it, when the room feels still, when your spirit becomes aware, when peace settles like warm light on your skin. You may not see anything with earthly eyes, but something inside tells you, I am not by myself. This awareness is not frightening, it is comforting, it is steadying. It is the holy recognition that heaven is drawing close, and those assigned to your soul are standing near. Angels have always walked with you, but the awareness of them deepens when eternity approaches. Their presence becomes more tangible, more undeniable, more intertwined with your days. You begin to sense them in the quiet moments, when you're lying awake at night and the darkness feels less empty than it used to. You sense it when you pray, and the room seems to settle around you as if listening. You sense it when grief or fear tries to rise, but instead melts under a weight of calm that doesn't feel like your own strength. These moments are whispers of heaven, reminders that God does not let his children transition alone. He does not leave you to journey toward eternity without escort. He sends his angels to surround you, to comfort you, to guide you through a season few can understand. Some describe it as a warmth, others describe it as a lightness, others simply know, deep in their chest, that they are accompanied. You may feel a presence sit near you when the room is quiet. You may feel the air shift gently as though something holy moved past. You may sense someone standing beside you even though no one is physically there. These are not hallucinations. These are not illusions. These are moments where your spirit is awakening to the unseen world you are being prepared to enter. Heaven begins guiding you long before your final breath. This awareness often intensifies in moments of weakness. When your body grows tired, when your emotions feel drained, when your strength runs low, the nearness of angels feels stronger, because heaven draws closest to the human soul when it is most vulnerable. Angels minister when you cannot. They comfort what words cannot reach. They hold what you cannot carry. Their presence eases the fear of the unknown. It reminds you that God's promises are not poetic. They are literal. And one of his promises is this: you will not walk through the valley alone. As you sense this escort, you may find that your fear of death begins to fade. Not because you are trying to be brave, but because your spirit begins to recognize that death is not punishment. It is passage, a doorway, a transition into the fullness of what God has prepared. Angels are not sent to frighten you. They are sent to signal that heaven is near, that the journey is watched, that you are being held in hands older than time. Their presence whispers, you are safe, you are seen, you are being guided. Sometimes this awareness comes in dreams where you feel lifted, protected, or accompanied by figures you cannot fully describe. Sometimes it comes while you're awake, when a sudden calm washes over you, or when you feel shielded in moments that would normally overwhelm you. Angels make their presence known not through spectacle, but through peace. They are messengers of assurance. They are carriers of God's nearness. They are escorts of the eternal path. You might notice a shift in your environment. Rooms feel softer, lighter. Fear does not cling the way it used to. Moments of prayer feel deeper. The air feels charged with something holy. This is because angels do not visit casually. They bring the atmosphere of heaven with them. Wherever they stand, peace stands. Wherever they move, darkness retreats. Wherever they rest, the soul becomes still. Their presence marks a sacred transition, one that your spirit recognizes long before your mind fully understands. People who sense angels near often describe feeling held, even when no one is holding them. They describe feeling covered, even when no one is physically there. They describe feeling seen, even in solitude. These sensations are signs that the spiritual realm is becoming more real to you than the physical one. Your soul is beginning to shift its focus, preparing for a world where faith becomes sight. This awareness also brings a change in how you see your life. You realize that nothing has been random. Nothing was overlooked. You were never abandoned. Even in the darkest seasons, you were guarded. You were accompanied. You were watched over. And now, as eternity draws closer, heaven simply makes its presence more visible to your spirit. Angels have been with you from the beginning. Now they stand nearer because the journey is entering its holiest chapter. There is no fear in this. Only peace, only presence, only reassurance that God is orchestrating every step. The angels who surround you are not strangers. They are familiar to your spirit, even if they are unfamiliar to your mind. They have walked beside you through seasons you survived without understanding how. They have stood between you and dangers you never knew were near. And now they stand as escorts, preparing to guide you into the place where pain ends, where tears are wiped away, where time is replaced by eternity. When you feel watched over, know this: heaven is not distant. Heaven is leaning close. The path ahead is not lonely. It is guided. You are not walking toward an ending. You are walking toward a beginning. Angels do not gather without purpose. Their presence is a sign that your transition is sacred, protected, and held by the one who wrote your story long before your first breath. And when the time comes, you will not walk alone. You will be escorted, gently, lovingly, peacefully, into the arms of God. Number 7, you experience vivid dreams, visions, or inner impressions of heaven's nearness. There comes a point in a soul's journey toward eternity when the barrier between this world and the next begins to thin. It does not happen loudly. It does not happen dramatically. It happens quietly, gently, like a veil being lifted one thread at a time. And the one who is approaching the final stretch of their earthly assignment begins to experience dreams, visions, and inner impressions that feel different from anything they have known before. These moments do not arrive as imagination. They arrive as revelation. They arrive as whispers from eternity, calling the soul to prepare itself for transition. They arrive as soft invitations from a realm that is closer than the mind has ever dared to believe. These dreams feel holy. They carry a weight, a sweetness, a clarity that ordinary dreams do not possess. They do not confuse you. They do not frighten you. They settle over you like a warm blanket, filling your heart with a strange and steady calm. In these dreams, you may see light unlike any earthly light. You may see landscapes that feel familiar, yet not of this world. You may see people who passed on long before you, not as shadows of memory, but as vibrant, living beings who radiate peace. You may hear music that no instrument on earth can play. You may feel a presence that surrounds you with love so deep it dissolves every fear of crossing over. For many, these visions come at night, when the world is quiet and the spirit is free from distraction. You may find yourself dreaming of walking down a long path lined with light. You may dream of standing before waters that seem alive with purity. You may dream of doors opening into spaces filled with warmth, beauty, and rest. You may dream of voices speaking gently to you, voices that do not need words to communicate truth. You don't wake from these dreams in distress. You wake with a feeling of longing, of understanding, of awareness that something sacred is drawing near. For others, these impressions come during moments of stillness, while sitting alone, while lying in bed, while watching sunlight filter through a window. You may suddenly feel as though the air around you has changed, as though something holy has entered the room, as though heaven has opened a small window just wide enough for your spirit to glimpse eternity. These impressions can feel like a pull, a gentle invitation, a reminder that you were never created to remain here forever. They awaken something ancient inside you, something that remembers you are a soul wrapped in a temporary body. It is not uncommon for people near the end of their earthly journey to describe seeing glimpses of those who have already crossed over. Some say they saw a mother, a father, a grandparent, or a friend standing quietly in the corner of the room, not in fear, not as a haunting, but as a greeting, as a reminder that the separation between realms is far thinner than we believe. The presence of these loved ones is not meant to startle. It is meant to comfort. Heaven does not send fear as a messenger. Heaven sends familiarity. Heaven sends peace. Heaven sends reassurance that you will not be crossing over alone. These visions also carry timing. They often come when the soul is preparing itself emotionally, spiritually, and mentally to release its grip on this world. You may find that the dreams become more frequent. The impressions are more vivid. The feeling of heaven's nearness is more consistent. This does not mean the end is immediate. It means heaven is preparing you step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment. God never rushes a soul into eternity unprepared. He prepares the heart long before the final breath leaves the body. There are moments when these visions include guidance. You may feel urged to release fear. You may sense that it is time to forgive. You may feel led to bless someone, or speak words of love, or reconcile old wounds. The visions do not simply reveal glimpses of heaven. They prepare you to transition with peace. They help your heart loosen its attachment to the things of earth. They help you release regret. They help you let go of the pressure to control. They help you step into surrender without resistance. Heaven speaks softly, But when it speaks, the soul hears clearly. Some people near the end experience visions that feel like journeys. They may describe floating, climbing, or moving through spaces filled with color or light. They may feel as though they are being escorted. They may feel a sense of elevation, of rising, of lifting above the heaviness of earthly weight. These are not hallucinations. They are spiritual experiences. They are glimpses of the journey the soul takes as it moves from the temporal to the eternal. The body weakens, but the spirit becomes stronger. The eyes dim, but the inner vision becomes clearer. But perhaps the most profound part of these visions is the peace they bring. Even when the images are mysterious, even when the impressions are new, even when the dreams feel larger than your understanding, the peace remains. The peace speaks louder than the images. The peace tells you that heaven is not something to fear. The peace tells you that God is near. The peace tells you that eternity is not the end. It is the continuation of everything your soul has always been reaching for. And that peace becomes the anchor that steadies you as the earthly journey begins to close. What you must understand is this: visions near the end of life are not signs of death. They are signs of heaven. They are signs of readiness. They are signs of transition. They are signs that God is walking with you through every step of the journey. They are signs that the spiritual realm is not far away. It is intertwined with your existence even now. And when the time approaches, that realm draws closer to meet you, comfort you, prepare you, and eventually receive you. So when these dreams come, do not fear them. When these visions appear, do not question your mind. When these impressions settle over your heart, do not dismiss them. They are not tricks. They are not confusion. They are not accidents. They are heaven's way of holding your hand. They are God's way of telling you that the next chapter of your existence will not be darkness. It will be light. Not sorrow, but joy. Not endings, but beginnings. And when the moment finally comes, when breath turns to stillness and time releases its grip on your body, those visions will become reality. The light will not fade. It will open. The presence you sensed will not leave. It will embrace. The peace that rested on you will not lift. It will deepen. And everything your spirit glimpsed in those early dreamlike moments will unfold in its fullness as heaven receives you. Not as a stranger, but as a soul that it has been preparing to welcome all along. There are moments in a person's journey when the veil between earth and eternity grows thin, when the invisible becomes strangely noticeable, when the spirit senses what the body does not yet understand. Long before your final breath, long before your eyes close to this world, heaven begins preparing for your arrival. And though the process is unseen, unspoken, and often misunderstood, the spirit realm becomes active in ways that only a soul in transition can truly feel. It is not frightening. It is not chaotic. It is not dark. It is holy. It is peaceful. It is ordered. And it is filled with a type of love that the human mind cannot fully grasp. The first thing that begins to shift in the spirit realm is attention. Heaven turns its gaze toward you. Angels assigned to your life draw closer, not to alarm you, but to surround you, to strengthen you, to accompany you. They move with softness, not urgency, because they are not coming to take. They are coming to escort. They watch over your steps, your breath, your moments. They guard your thoughts. They quiet the atmosphere around you. They create a sacred field of peace so that the transition of your soul is not chaotic, but guided. It is in these moments that many people begin sensing an uncommon calm, a stillness that feels supernatural, a tenderness resting on their spirit that does not match their situation. That calm is not emptiness, it is heaven drawing near. Heaven also begins to prepare by aligning your spirit with truth. Things that once felt loud suddenly grow quiet. Things you once feared lose their power. The worries that tethered your mind begin to loosen. The anxieties that once weighed heavily on your chest begin to release. Not because your circumstances changed, but because your spirit is being lifted, elevated, gently drawn toward the divine. Heaven softens your heart so that fear cannot cling to you in the final moments. It clears your mind so that regret cannot fog your soul. It strengthens your inner being so that your transition is not marked by confusion, but by clarity. This is why many, nearing the final stretch of their earthly life, begin to see life differently. Eternity becomes more real. God's presence becomes more tangible. The temporary things of this world lose their grip. Heaven does this intentionally. It reorients your desires so that your spirit is ready to rise. As heaven prepares for your arrival, there is often a gathering, an assembly of the unseen. Angels, yes, but also familiar spirits whose lives have already crossed into glory. People you loved, people who prayed for you, people whose journeys are woven into your story. They do not come to haunt, they do not come to frighten. They come to welcome, to comfort, to stand at the edge of eternity as witnesses to your homecoming. Many nearing death speak of seeing faces they loved long ago. They describe hearing voices that bring peace. They describe sensing someone standing beside their bed even when the room appears empty. These moments are not hallucinations. They are glimpses, brief openings in the veil, allowing the soul to recognize that it will not cross alone. Heaven also sends revelation. It may come in dreams, visions, impressions, or a sudden knowing. The spirit is allowed to see glimpses of what lies beyond the veil, often too sacred to put into words. These glimpses are not random. They are invitations, gentle reminders that what comes next is not darkness, but light. Not loss, but arrival. Not the end, but the beginning of a life more real than anything experienced on earth. People describe seeing landscapes brighter than any sunrise, hearing music that does not exist in the natural world, or feeling a warmth that does not burn, but embraces. These visions serve one purpose: to remove fear. Heaven gives the spirit hints of home so that when the moment comes, you will not cling to what is fading. In the spirit realm, there is also preparation for release. Heaven helps untie the soul from the weight of earthly attachments. Not the love. Love does not disappear. But the fear, the guilt, the unfinished stories, the emotional burdens. Heaven loosens the knots. It helps the soul lay down what cannot be carried into eternity. This is why many people near the threshold suddenly feel compelled to forgive, to reconcile, to bless someone, to speak final words, to express gratitude, or to release old pain. These impulses are not coincidence. They are spiritual orchestration. Heaven is preparing your heart for freedom. There is also a shift in the communication between God and the soul. The voice of God grows clearer, even if not spoken aloud. The soul becomes more receptive, more aware of divine presence, more attuned to spiritual truths. Heaven speaks through peace, through knowing, through silence, through comfort that cannot be explained. God surrounds the soul with a love so deep that fear cannot maintain its hold. And for the first time in a long time, perhaps in a lifetime, the soul understands what it means to be completely safe. As heaven prepares, time begins to feel different. Days may feel shorter or longer. Moments feel sacred. There is a sense that life is slowing down for a reason. This is not deterioration. It is transition. The spirit begins stepping out of the confines of time and gently touching the edges of eternity. The limits of the physical world loosen their grip. Some individuals speak of seeing light in the room at night, feeling warmth in cold spaces, or sensing movement they cannot explain. These sensations are not to be feared. They are evidence that heaven is near. Heaven also prepares the path. Angels position themselves to accompany the soul through the crossing. They provide peace in moments of fear, comfort in moments of pain, strength in moments of weakness. They stand beside the bed, not waiting for death, but preparing for transition. The moment the soul lifts from the body is not chaotic. It is intentional, guided, cradled. In the spirit realm, there is no confusion. There is no wandering. The soul is immediately escorted, wrapped in peace, surrounded by light. As the moment draws near, heaven's nearness becomes overwhelming. The presence of God grows thick, tangible. Some describe it as warmth, others as light, others as a feeling of being surrounded by love so complete it quiets every fear. Heaven does not wait on the other side. It meets you at the doorway. And when your spirit finally steps out of the body, you are not falling. You are being held. You are not entering darkness. You are stepping into brilliance. You are not being taken away. You are being welcomed home. This is what happens in the spirit realm when heaven prepares for your arrival. It is sacred. It is intentional. It is full of love, orchestration, protection, and peace. And though the body may resist, the soul recognizes the call, not as loss, but as return. The same God who carried you through life comes again in your final moments, not to end your story, but to fulfill it, completing the journey that leads you into eternal rest, eternal joy, and eternal home. There is a mystery in the way life leaves the body, a holy distinction that heaven understands even when the earth does not. Not all departures are the same. Not every last breath carries the same weight. Some deaths come like interruptions, sudden, forceful, unexpected, moments where life is pulled away by the frailty of the body or the violence of the world. But there is another kind of passing, one that Scripture whispers about, one that the Spirit understands, one that heaven recognizes long before the moment arrives. It is not a natural death, it is a called home death, a departure that is not forced but welcomed, not chaotic but peaceful, not random but intentional. It is when God Himself decides, your work is done, your race is finished, it is time to come home. A natural death is a consequence of the world we live in. Bodies wear down, hearts weaken, cells fail. Time has its way with flesh. People age, accidents happen, sickness takes hold. Natural death feels earthly. It feels connected to the limits of human life. It feels like something happening to you, something you endure, something you face because you are mortal. But a called home death does not feel like the world taking something away from you. It feels like heaven receiving you. It feels like your spirit hearing a familiar voice saying, "It's time." The door is open. Come rest where you belong. A natural death often carries fear because the body resists what the spirit is not ready for. The mind struggles, the heart clings, the emotions tremble. People fight to stay because the moment feels unfinished. But when someone is being called home, something changes inside them long before the final breath arrives. The fear dissolves, the panic fades, the resistance softens. The spirit loosens its grip on the world and begins to reach for something higher. You see it in their eyes, you hear it in their tone, you sense it in their presence. They begin transitioning internally while still alive externally. They are here, yet touched by somewhere else. A natural death often comes with questions. Why now? Why like this? Why so soon? Why so unexpectedly? But a called home death has answers the world cannot hear. Heaven whispers them into the spirit before the body ever begins to weaken. The person knows even if they cannot explain it. They feel finished with earth. They feel complete. They feel released. They feel like they have given all they were meant to give. spoken all they were meant to speak, loved all they were meant to love. Something in them stops striving, something in them settles, something in them accepts with divine ease what others fear. In a natural death, the environment may feel heavy, chaotic, uncertain. But in a called home death, the atmosphere shifts. It becomes holy, tender, peaceful, sacred. A softness fills the room, a stillness wraps around the space. People speak in whispers without realizing why. Time feels slower, the air feels gentler. The presence of God settles with an indescribable nearness. Sometimes it feels as if angels are standing at the edges of the bed. Sometimes it feels like heaven is leaning close. Sometimes the dying person will look past the room as if they see something no one else can. They are already halfway into eternity. A natural death is about the body failing. A called home death is about the spirit responding. In a natural death, life is taken. In a called home death, life is offered back. It is not the closing of a story, but the fulfillment of it. The person is not being removed, they are being welcomed. They are not being separated, they are being gathered. They are not being cut off, they are being completed. Their departure is not an end, it is a return. A natural death can feel abrupt. A called home death feels prepared. The person begins letting go of earthly ties, burdens, grudges, regrets, fears. They begin releasing pain, mending relationships, blessing others, speaking truths they held in their heart for years. They begin to see their life with new clarity. They begin to forgive with ease. They begin to reflect with softness. Their heart becomes light, as if they are untying themselves from the world, one memory at a time. This preparation is not accidental. It is heaven readying the spirit for transition. A natural death can feel like darkness closing in, but a called home death feels like light drawing near. Something holy surrounds the moment. Something sacred rests on the person. Something unexplainable reassures the spirit. It is not fear. They feel watched over. It is not dread. They feel held. It is not uncertainty. They feel guided. The boundary between earth and heaven becomes thin, almost transparent. They begin slipping between realms without struggle. A natural death focuses on the body's decline. A called home death focuses on the spirit's ascension. In a natural death, the question becomes, what is happening to them? In a called home death, the question becomes, where are they going? And the spirit knows the answer before the mouth can say it. They are going where peace is not temporary, where joy is not fragile, where time does not decay what love builds. They are going home. A natural death may come before a person is ready. A called home death never does. Heaven does not summon a spirit without first preparing it, comforting it, guiding it. People who are called home often speak of seeing loved ones who passed before them. They describe light, music, or warmth. They say they dream differently. They grow quiet, but not afraid. They begin to feel as if they are being escorted rather than abandoned. They feel something familiar drawing them closer, not a place, but a presence. A natural death causes confusion for those left behind. A called home death, though painful, carries a deep sense of meaning. Something inside the family recognizes the holiness of the moment. Something whispers that God is near. Something understands that this was not destruction, but completion. This was not loss, but transition. This was not the world winning. It was heaven fulfilling its promise. A natural death ends a life. A called home death begins a new one. Not in metaphor, but in reality. Heaven is not symbolic, it is literal. It is a place prepared, a place waiting, a place where the spirit awakens to what it was always meant to experience. And when someone is called home, the veil lifts for them. The weight of the world falls away entirely. They see clearly. They step freely. They rise wholly. The moment the breath leaves their body, the fullness of life enters their spirit. They do not fade. They transform. They do not disappear. They awaken. The difference between a natural death and a called home death is simple yet profound. One is the end of earthly life. The other is the beginning of eternal communion. One is shaped by the frailty of humanity. The other is shaped by the invitation of God. One is the body's surrender. The other is the spirit's release. One is finality. The other is fulfillment. And every time heaven calls someone home, God is not taking. They are receiving. They are embracing. They are welcoming. They are completing the journey they began the moment breath entered their lungs. This is the difference. And once you understand it, you begin to see death not as a fear, but as a doorway. One that only opens when heaven itself is ready to greet you. There comes a moment in the journey toward eternity when something inside a person shifts so quietly, so gently, so deeply that those around them can sense it before they ever speak a word. It is the moment when God, in His mercy, begins lifting the fear of dying from the human heart. Not suddenly, not harshly, not with pressure or force, but with a peace that settles slowly, like dawn moving across the horizon, changing the atmosphere without demanding attention. Fear begins to lose its grip, not because the person becomes stronger, but because God becomes nearer. Near enough to silence the trembling, near enough to calm the soul, near enough to remind them that death is not abandonment, but transition, an escorted passage into a place where sorrow cannot enter. This removal of fear is not the work of human courage, it is the work of divine presence. There comes a point where the spirit becomes aware that heaven is closer than the earth beneath their feet. They begin to sense that what waits for them is not darkness, but light. Not endings, but beginnings. Not emptiness, but fullness. And that awareness, that holy pull, begins untangling every knot of dread the heart once held. It does not erase the reality of departure, but it transforms the meaning of it. Death stops looking like a cliff and begins looking like a doorway guarded by love and held open by the hands of the one who promised to never forsake them. When God removes the fear of dying, the mind softens. The racing thoughts slow. The questions that once tormented the heart lose their power. The person no longer wrestles with what will be left behind, but rests in who is waiting ahead. Worry loosens its grip, not because all answers have been given, but because God becomes the answer. Fear dissolves as presence increases. Anxiety fades as eternity grows nearer. Where panic once lived, peace begins to breathe. A peace so steady, so holy, so unlike anything the person ever felt during their lifetime that it becomes unmistakable that heaven is preparing them. It is not that the person no longer loves this life. It is that they begin to love the life beyond it more. They begin to feel drawn, as if something on the other side is calling their name softly, reassuringly, telling them they are known, expected, welcomed. This call does not sound like pressure. It sounds like home. And home does not frighten the soul. Home comforts it. Home reminds it that every struggle, every tear, every ache of this world was temporary. The heart begins to realize that the one who walked with them through every valley will walk with them through this one too. They will not step into death alone. They will not close their eyes into emptiness. They will be carried. There are moments during this period when the person may sit quietly, staring into what looks like nothingness, yet you can feel they are looking into something. Something unseen, but very real. Something that calms them more than words ever could. The fear that once made them tremble no longer rises. Instead, an inward assurance takes root. It is the assurance that their story is not being cut short. It is being completed. God finishes what he begins. And when he begins removing fear, it is because he is preparing to finish something holy. Loved ones around them may notice the shift. They may notice a gentleness in their voice, a softness in their breathing, a settling in their spirit. They may notice the release of worry about the future, the letting go of anxieties about tomorrow, the loosening of their grip on things they once fought to control. This is not resignation, this is readiness. It is the quiet trust that God has gone ahead of them. It is the assurance that nothing in death is unknown to the one who formed them. Fear of dying comes from the assumption that something terrible awaits. But when God removes that fear, he replaces it with understanding, an understanding that heaven is not a punishment, but a promise. God does not prepare a place for his children only to terrify them on the way there. He prepares their hearts as carefully as he prepares their eternal home. He removes fear because fear would only cloud the beauty of what is coming. Fear would overshadow the peace that is meant to guide them gently forward. So he removes it layer by layer, breath by breath, moment by moment. As fear leaves, gratitude often rises. Gratitude for the life lived. Gratitude for the memories created. Gratitude for the forgiveness given. Gratitude for the hope that never failed them. Gratitude for the presence of God that has grown stronger, clearer, and closer. This gratitude creates a sacred environment around them. It is as if their spirit begins worshiping without words. The atmosphere around them changes. The room takes on a quiet holiness. Something shifts that even the unspiritual can feel. And then the person begins to release things they once feared to let go of. They release unfinished plans. They release unasked questions. They release the weight of expectations. They release regrets. They release the grip of what-ifs. They release the fear of leaving others behind because they trust now that God will continue the work they no longer can. That trust is a gift only heaven can give, a gift that replaces fear with sacred surrender. Fear of dying is rooted in separation. But when God removes fear, he reveals that death is not separation for his children, it is union. Union with the one who shaped them, union with peace, union with joy that never fades, union with eternal life. The sting of death is not felt when heaven is calling. The terror of dying is dissolved when God himself becomes the comfort. Fear cannot survive where divine presence dwells. So when God removes the fear of death, it is not a small thing. It is a holy thing, a miracle of mercy, a sign of readiness, a whisper from eternity saying, "It is safe to come home." It is the final kindness God gives to the human heart before it steps into glory. The reassurance that death is not something to fear, but something to follow him through. And once that fear is gone, nothing on earth can hold the soul back. Because peace, once given, becomes an anchor, pulling them gently toward the place they were always meant to be. There is a mystery so holy, so tender, so wrapped in heaven's gentleness that even the strongest hearts grow still at the thought of it. It is the moment when the veil between earth and eternity thins, the moment when the breath of this world begins to loosen its hold and the breath of heaven draws near like a quiet tide rising against the shore of the soul. And while many fear this moment, heaven does not. For long before the body grows weak, long before the final heartbeat whispers its last rhythm, heaven prepares an escort, angels assigned, appointed, and anointed to carry the soul from time into timelessness. Most people think death is something you face alone, something you enter through fear, something you must navigate trembling and uncertain. But that is not the testimony of Scripture, nor is it the pattern of heaven. God never leaves his children to cross from earth to eternity by themselves. Just as angels attend birth, angels attend departure. From the first breath to the last, heaven never stops watching over the soul. And when the final moment arrives, angels do not come as strangers. They come as familiar guardians who have walked with you for years, unseen but always present. The escorting of a soul is not a hurried moment. It is not rushed. It is not chaotic. It is a ceremony, a sacred transition carried out with reverence. Angels do not come in fear, and they do not arrive in darkness. They come clothed in peace. They stand with authority. Their presence fills the room with a holiness that even people who do not understand God can feel. The atmosphere changes when angels arrive for this purpose. Time feels softer. The air feels lighter. The space feels full, yet quiet. Something in the human spirit knows. Something holy is happening here. There are moments before passing where the one who is leaving Earth begins to look upward, as if seeing something invisible to everyone else. They may speak to someone no one else can see. They may smile at a presence no one else can feel. They may reach upward, not in confusion, but in recognition. This is not delirium. This is alignment. The spirit begins seeing what the body cannot. The eyes of the soul begin opening to what has been waiting all along. The person is not imagining. They are welcoming. Angels are drawing near, and the soul responds to their nearness like metal drawn to a magnet. The escort begins before the final breath. Angels often gather in the room hours, sometimes days, before the transition. They stand around the bed like guards. They silence fear. They push back darkness. They keep confusion from entering. They surround the soul with comfort. They minister peace. Their presence is not always visible, but it is always felt. People often describe feeling watched over, feeling warmth, feeling protected, feeling as though the room itself becomes sacred. This is the ministry of the escorting angels preparing the atmosphere for departure. When the moment finally arrives, the angels draw closer. They do not come with sadness, because heaven does not mourn the arrival of a soul. It celebrates it. They come with tenderness, because the journey of life has been long and the soul must be carried gently. They come with authority, because they escort a child of God through territory where fear once had power. They come with joy, because the homecoming of a soul is the fulfillment of God's promise. The actual moment of separation between spirit and body is peaceful. So peaceful that many describe it as simply falling asleep. The body grows quiet, the breath slows, and then the spirit, released from its earthly weight, rises. Not in confusion, not in terror, but in recognition. Angels do not drag the soul. They surround it. They steady it, they lift it, and the soul, now freed, begins to see what eyes of flesh were never meant to perceive. The journey from earth to eternity is not a long one. It is not traveled alone. Angels accompany every step. They stand at each side, guiding, covering, guarding. Their presence is like a shield of light, ensuring that nothing from the realm of darkness can interfere with the soul's transition. For the moment a soul is released, it becomes more aware than it has ever been, aware of God, aware of eternity, aware of the spiritual world. And the escorting angels ensure that the soul makes its passage safely and peacefully. Some souls rise quickly, as if running into the arms of God. Others rise slowly, taking in the beauty of what they now perceive. Some look back at the room, not in longing, but in blessing, wanting to leave peace for those still waiting on earth. Angels allow a brief moment of this awareness because heaven's transitions are full of gentleness, not abruptness. But once the soul releases earth entirely, the angels guide it upward, 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 until the weight of time falls away and the light of eternity becomes all that remains. The angels on this assignment are not ordinary messengers. They are chosen. They are experienced. They are deeply compassionate. They understand human emotion. They understand earthly struggle. They understand the sacredness of a soul who has endured life's trials. Their escort is not mechanical, it is personal. They walk with understanding, as though they have been waiting for this moment with anticipation. There are times when angels escort a soul with singing. Not earthly songs, but melodies the human spirit instantly recognizes. Songs of welcome, songs of belonging, songs of homecoming. These songs do not travel through the air, they travel through the soul. It is music that feels like memory, like destiny, like love older than time. Angels sing because heaven celebrates every soul that enters its gates. They sing because joy is the language of eternity. As the soul draws closer to heaven, angels withdraw gently, allowing the presence of God to become the focus. For no soul is escorted into eternity without meeting the one who created it. God does not send angels to receive the soul, He sends angels to escort it to Him. The final steps are always taken in His presence alone, where love is not felt, but seen, where glory is not imagined, but experienced. Angels return afterward, but not empty-handed. They return with joy because a life has been completed, a purpose fulfilled, a journey finished. They return with peace because they have delivered a soul safely home. They return with reverence because escorting a soul is one of the highest honors in the angelic realm. This is why the Bible says, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of His saints." It is precious because heaven sees what the earth cannot. What looks like an ending is a beginning. What looks like loss is fulfillment. What looks like departure is arrival. And what looks like darkness is actually glory. So when angels escort a soul, it is not tragedy. It is ceremony. It is not terror. It is transition. It is not abandonment. It is homecoming. The soul is never alone. The room is never empty. Heaven is never distant. The journey is guided. The passage is protected. And the arrival is glorious. This is the truth of how angels escort souls into eternity. Gently, reverently, victoriously, and with the full authority of heaven behind them. And when the escort is complete, heaven receives a child who has finally crossed the threshold into everlasting belonging. There are moments in life when heaven begins to move long before earth understands what is happening. Moments when the atmosphere around a family shifts quietly, gently, almost imperceptibly, as if the spiritual world is preparing hearts for something the mind is not yet ready to face. When someone is nearing the end of their earthly journey, God does not allow their loved ones to walk into that moment unprepared. He moves with tenderness. He moves with mercy. He moves with the kind of divine gentleness that only becomes clear in hindsight. And though the approaching moment of departure may feel sudden to the world, heaven has been preparing the family long before anyone realizes why certain feelings, conversations, or impressions have begun to surface. God prepares family members by softening their hearts in ways that seem subtle but are deeply intentional. Old tensions begin to ease. Unspoken hurts begin to loosen. Walls that have stood for years begin to crack without anyone forcing them. There is a quiet shift. Something inside begins to make room for grace, compassion, and understanding. You may not realize it at the time, but heaven is tenderizing the heart so love can flow freely in the final stretch. God works gently, removing hardness one layer at a time so that love, not regret, becomes the memory that remains. There are conversations that begin to happen out of nowhere, conversations that carry more weight than usual. A family member suddenly asks deeper questions. Another begins reminiscing about old memories. Someone brings up forgiveness. Someone else talks about the importance of unity. No one may mention death, no one may sense its timeline, but heaven is nudging the family into emotional alignment. These are not random discussions. They are preparations. They are spiritual transitions clothed in ordinary words. Sometimes family members begin to feel a strange mixture of heaviness and peace. A heaviness that comes from sensing something shifting. A peace that comes from God cushioning them before the moment arrives. They may not understand why they feel it. They may try to ignore it. But the Spirit knows before the mind recognizes. And what the Spirit knows, the heart eventually begins to feel. God allows the feeling so the blow does not come without warning. He prepares the soul gently so the coming grief does not crush them beyond repair. There are moments when a family member suddenly feels drawn to check on their loved one more often. A son who rarely calls begins calling daily. A daughter who has been distant suddenly wants to reconnect. A sibling who moved far away feels a strange urge to visit. They may not explain the reason. They may simply say, "I just felt like I needed to." That feeling is not coincidence. It is a divine tug. Heaven is realigning relationships, gathering hearts, drawing people close before the separation of worlds takes place. Sometimes God prepares the family by giving them extra tenderness toward the one whose time is drawing near. Irritations suddenly fade. Frustrations lose their power. Patience deepens in ways that surprise everyone involved. Even those who normally struggle to express emotion find themselves becoming gentler, kinder, more attentive. This tenderness is not manufactured by human effort. It is placed there by God so that the final days are covered with compassion instead of conflict. There are also signs in the emotional realm. Family members may experience unexpected waves of sadness, not overwhelming, but noticeable. They may feel reflective, thoughtful, nostalgic. They may find themselves crying without knowing why. These are not emotional coincidences. These are spiritual signals, gentle preparations to soften the heart so the moment of transition does not feel like a sudden storm. God does not let grief strike without preparing a cushion beneath it. He shapes the emotional landscape long before the shadow of separation comes. Sometimes God prepares families through dreams. A mother dreams of their loved one smiling peacefully. A child dreams of a reunion that feels strangely comforting. A sibling dreams of saying goodbye even when they did not know goodbye was near. These dreams are not accidents of the subconscious. They are messages sent in mercy. They are heaven's way of whispering, prepare, love deeply, hold gently, release slowly. Dreams come so the heart will not be shocked when reality mirrors what the spirit has already seen. There are also divine delays and divine opportunities God orchestrates so that final connections can take place. A cancelled meeting allows a loved one to be present. A sudden urge to visit leads to a meaningful moment. A random encounter becomes a holy appointment that later feels like a gift signed by God Himself. These moments are not chance. They are heaven coordinating the timeline of love so that no essential words remain unsaid, no final moments are missed, and no heart feels robbed of closure. When the time grows closer, family members often begin to feel a deepening sense of gratitude. Gratitude for moments they once overlooked. Gratitude for memories they had forgotten. Gratitude for simple things like shared meals, old stories, familiar laughter. Gratitude becomes heightened because God is preparing the heart to hold on to love rather than cling to loss. He does not erase the grief, but He strengthens the foundation beneath it, so that gratitude becomes a refuge in the days ahead. God prepares families by gently releasing denial. At first, the thought of losing someone feels impossible, but slowly, quietly, God begins dissolving the denial that could hinder acceptance. He does not do it harshly. He does it tenderly. He allows little hints of awareness to seep into the heart. A loved one looks weaker. Their words become softer. Their presence feels more sacred. Denial begins to fade, not because the mind wants it to, but because heaven begins shifting the atmosphere around the family. This is not a sign of giving up. It is a sign of preparation. It is God helping hearts transition so the moment does not crush them beyond healing. He also prepares families by strengthening their bond with Him. People who have not prayed in years suddenly feel the urge to pray. People who have not opened scripture in months begin reading again. People who felt spiritually dull feel themselves awakening. This spiritual drawing is not random. It is God gathering His children so that when grief comes, they do not collapse inward. Instead, they find themselves wrapped in a divine presence strong enough to carry them. In the final stretch, God prepares families by filling the room with an unusual calm. Even when emotions swirl, even when fear whispers, even when the moment approaches, there is often a profound peace that settles over the atmosphere. This peace does not come from human strength. It comes from heaven. It comes from angels standing guard. It comes from God standing near. It comes from the spiritual realm surrounding the family with comfort no words can describe. And when the final moment comes, when breath fades into eternity, when heaven opens its arms, when the soul steps into glory, families often feel something holy, a quietness, a warmth, a release, a sense that the room is full, even though no one can explain why. This is not imagination. It is the presence of God sealing His preparation with peace. God does not leave families to stumble blindly into loss. He prepares them gently, carefully, lovingly. He strengthens their hearts. He softens their spirits. He aligns their emotions. He draws them close. He fills the atmosphere with comfort. And when the moment arrives, they are not as unprepared as they feared, because heaven has been working long before their minds understood. This is the mercy of God. This is the tenderness of heaven. This is the love that prepares before it asks you to walk through the valley. And though grief may come, it comes softened, covered, and carried by the one who prepares all things with purpose. There is a moment, so small, so delicate, so sacred, that human language can barely describe it. It is the moment when breath stops, when the body grows still, and when the spirit steps into eternity for the first time. It is not a violent tearing. It is not chaos. It is not confusion. It is transition. Holy, gentle, breathtaking. A crossing over, a doorway that opens not with fear, but with a pull, a drawing, a release. And in the very first seconds after the spirit leaves the body, more happens than the human mind could ever imagine. Eternity awakens. Heaven responds. The unseen becomes visible. Everything the soul has ever known shifts into clarity. When the spirit slips out of the body, there is a weight that lifts instantly. A heaviness that belonged to flesh, but never belonged to eternity, falls away. Every limitation, every pain, every sickness, every fear, every earthly burden, gone in a single breathless moment. The spirit becomes aware of itself in a way the body could never understand. You feel lighter than air, yet more real than you have ever been. You are not drifting, you are not lost. You are overwhelmingly aware, conscious, awake in a way you've never experienced. You recognize, perhaps for the first time, that the body was never the real you. You were always spirit first, and now the spirit is free. In those first seconds, there is no confusion. There is no uncertainty. There is no panic. Instead, there is recognition. Things you sensed all your life suddenly make perfect sense. What felt distant becomes close. What felt veiled becomes clear. You understand why the scriptures say that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. That presence is not far away. It is not behind clouds or locked behind gates. It is immediate, overwhelming, radiant, and unmistakable. The Spirit becomes aware of light, light unlike anything on earth. It is not a light that blinds, it is a light that reveals. It is warm, welcoming, intelligent. It moves toward you as if it recognizes you. And it does. Because heaven has known your name longer than the earth ever did. In that light is love so deep that it pulls the soul forward without force, without pressure, simply by its goodness. It feels like home, not a place, but a presence. You know instantly that this is where you came from, and this is where you were always meant to return. In the first seconds after death, the Spirit hears differently, not with ears, but with understanding. Messages, impressions, knowledge flow like water. You know things without needing them explained. You understand truth, not as information, but as revelation. You see your life not in panic or shame, but in clarity. You recognize moments, you understand purpose. You see divine patterns you could not understand while anchored to flesh. There is no accusation, there is no condemnation, only understanding, deep, compassionate understanding. But one of the most powerful things that happens in those first seconds is the appearance of angels. They do not arrive late. They do not come from afar. They are there, present the moment your spirit releases from the body. Angels who walked with you, angels who guarded you, angels who strengthened you, angels who recorded your prayers and carried your tears before the throne. Their presence is not frightening, it is familiar. The soul knows them, even if the mind never recognized them on earth. Their nearness brings comfort that cannot be described. They stand as escorts, not judges, companions, not strangers. Some describe it as being lifted, others describe it as being guided. But the Spirit does not float aimlessly. It is led. Angels stand at both sides, not grabbing, not dragging, but welcoming, honoring. Their presence alone confirms that heaven expected you, that your arrival was not random or unnoticed, that eternity prepared for this moment long before your body took its first breath. In those first seconds, the Spirit becomes aware of two worlds at once, the earthly fading behind and the heavenly unfolding before. You may glance back, not with regret, not with longing, but with clarity. You understand your earthly life differently. The things that once terrified you lose their grip. The things you stressed over look small. The people you loved feel close in a different way, not distant, not unreachable, but connected through eternity instead of time. You realize that love never dies. It simply shifts realms. The Spirit may observe the body, but not with attachment. You understand that the body served its purpose. It carried you. It walked you through the world. It bore burdens. It held memories. But now it is finished. And the Spirit does not mourn the body. It honors it and releases it. There is no fear, no confusion, no desire to return, because what stands before the Spirit is so much more real, so much more alive, so much more beautiful. In those first seconds, the Spirit becomes aware of sound not like earthly sound, but resonance, a hum, a frequency, a pulling, the sound of heaven calling. It is not rushed, it is not hurried, it is steady, like a heartbeat that has existed before creation itself. The Spirit recognizes the sound as familiar. You have heard pieces of it your whole life, in moments of worship, in moments of surrender, in moments of prayer, in moments of awakening. But now you hear it clearly. It is the sound of home. There is also recognition of presence that is greater than anything the human body could withstand. a holiness that does not frighten but fulfills, a presence that fills the spirit with awe. You do not run from it. You run toward it, pulled by love, not by fear. You feel seen, not judged or exposed, but truly seen, completely known, entirely understood. In the first seconds after leaving the body, peace becomes not something you feel, but something you are inside of. You are enveloped in it, wrapped in it, surrounded by it in ways the world could never offer. This peace is not passive. It is alive. It speaks without words. It tells you, you are safe, you are home, you are whole. And though angels stand with you, though heaven opens before you, there is one presence above all others who draws the spirit forward, God Himself. You do not see a face immediately. You do not comprehend form. What you understand first is love. Love so overwhelming, so total, so consuming that everything in you responds. This love is not abstract. It is not symbolic. It is real, personal, specific to you. And you realize instantly, He has always loved you like this. Earth only allowed you to feel fragments of that love. Eternity lets you feel its fullness. In those first seconds, the spirit understands time differently. Time no longer feels linear or restrictive. It feels expansive. What feels like seconds may stretch into something beyond counting. Heaven is not bound by minutes. It is bound by meaning. And everything about this moment is meaningful. Then comes the invitation. Not spoken in human language, but communicated perfectly in spirit. It is not a command. It is not a demand. It is a welcome, a call, a beckoning into the fullness of eternity. And the spirit, released from every earthly weight, responds willingly, freely, completely. Because in those first seconds, heaven becomes undeniable. God becomes unavoidable. Love becomes irresistible. The journey has begun. The spirit has crossed over, and the first seconds are only the beginning of glory. There is a mystery God has woven into the closing moments of a faithful life, a quiet holiness that surrounds the soul when its journey on earth begins to fade and its footsteps turn toward eternity. Heaven does not wait passively for the faithful to arrive. Heaven leans in. Heaven draws close. Heaven prepares an atmosphere around that soul that is unlike anything it has ever known on earth. These moments are not accidental. They are intentional, sacred, orchestrated with tenderness by the one who has walked with that person through storms, deserts, valleys, and mountaintops. When a life has been lived with faith, even imperfect faith, even faith that trembled on certain days, heaven takes notice. And when the final chapter approaches, heaven honors that journey in ways the natural eye cannot see. In the final moments of a faithful life, something in the atmosphere shifts. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is quiet, yet unmistakably divine. The room feels different, as if the veil between realms is thinning. The air grows soft. Peace settles like a warm mantle over the body, even before breath slows. You can sense a preparation taking place, an unseen reverence, a heavenly anticipation, a spiritual acknowledgement of a soul who has wrestled with doubt, yet held on to hope, who has walked through darkness, yet refused to let go of God's hand. Heaven never overlooks the journey of a believer. Every prayer, every tear, every act of obedience, every sacrifice, every unseen moment of surrender has been recorded in eternity. And as the final breath approaches, all of heaven rises to honor what earth cannot fully appreciate. Heaven honors a life of faith by surrounding the soul with a presence so gentle, so steady, that fear loses its grip entirely. The soul begins to feel lifted, supported, held. There is no panic in these moments for the faithful. Instead, There is a deep awareness that they are not crossing alone. God draws near not to frighten, but to comfort, to steady, to usher the spirit into the peace it has longed for. Angels gather not as spectators, but as escorts assigned to honor a life that has carried the fragrance of devotion. They stand ready, not rushing, not pushing, but waiting with reverent patience for the exact moment heaven calls. In these final moments, heaven acknowledges every battle the soul has fought. The spiritual wounds, the emotional scars, the nights of crying out in prayer, the silent endurance through suffering. Heaven honors all of it. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is overlooked. God remembers every time that soul chose love over bitterness, truth over convenience, faith over fear. He remembers every time they forgave when they could have held on to resentment. He remembers every moment they trusted him when circumstances tried to break them. He remembers each sacrifice made quietly, each act of kindness given without recognition, each cup of water offered in his name. Heaven sees it all. And in these final moments, that life is not received casually. It is welcomed with the honor given to a warrior who has finished the fight and kept the faith. Heaven honors a faithful life by lifting the weight of earth from the soul. Memories that once felt heavy dissolve. Regrets lose their power. Wounds that once shaped their identity fall away. The soul begins to feel light, almost buoyant, as if something inside is preparing to rise. This lightness is not imagination. It is heaven loosening earth's grip. It is the Spirit of God easing the transition. It is grace becoming tangible around the soul. The faithful do not leave in fear. They leave in release. They leave in surrender that feels holy. They leave being carried, not dragged. Heaven makes the crossing gentle. Heaven honors a faithful life with revelation. In the final moments, the soul begins to understand what it could not see clearly on earth. Suddenly, it becomes aware of God's hand in every season. It sees the meaning behind the suffering. It recognizes the purpose hidden in the pain. It understands the reasons for unanswered prayers. It recognizes victories that were invisible in the natural. The soul enters a realm where clarity washes over everything that once felt confusing. Heaven does not let a faithful soul leave in uncertainty. It grants understanding as a final gift, an unveiling of divine truth that frees the soul from every lingering question. Heaven honors a faithful life by allowing them to sense the beauty and nearness of eternity even before they cross. They may speak of light. They may see loved ones who have gone before them. They may feel a pull towards somewhere far more beautiful than anything earth has offered. They may describe music, colors, or sensations not of this world. They are not imagining it. They are glimpsing home. Heaven often opens a window for the faithful, giving them a taste of the glory prepared for them. This is not a hallucination. It is an honor, a welcome, a preview of the promise God has been keeping for them since the day they first believed. Heaven honors a faithful life through divine nearness. God comes close, so close that peace floods the atmosphere, so close that fear has no place to land, so close that even those in the room can sense something holy settling over them. This nearness is unmistakable. It calms the room. It softens grief. It reminds everyone present that death is not an end for the faithful. It is a passageway, a doorway, a returning to the one who authored their life and walked with them through every chapter. Heaven honors a faithful life with a divine escort. No soul rises alone. Angels come with purpose and precision. They are gentle, strong, and filled with reverence. They do not snatch the soul, they receive it. They carry it with honor. They guide it into the presence of God with a dignity earth cannot replicate. And as the soul crosses, it is met with the full reality of divine love. Not the distant love it felt through faith, but a love that surrounds, embraces, and fills every part of its being. Heaven welcomes the faithful with joy. To heaven, a faithful life is not small. It is precious, it is treasured, it is celebrated. Earth may overlook what the person endured, people may forget the sacrifices made, but heaven never forgets. Heaven saw every moment. Heaven counted every tear. Heaven recorded every prayer. And when the final moment arrives, heaven honors that life with a welcome reserved only for those who fought the good fight, finished their race, and held on to faith even in the days when their strength felt thin. This is the honor heaven pours out, not in loud celebration, but in holy welcome, not in earthly applause, but in eternal embrace. When a faithful life reaches its final moments, heaven does not whisper, "It is over." Heaven declares, "You made it home." A journey through signs, mysteries, whispers, and holy moments that most people never speak about. Yet every soul will one day encounter. When heaven begins to call you home, it is never with fear. It is never with chaos. It is never with confusion. It is with peace. It is with presence. It is with a gentleness that wraps itself around your spirit and says, "You can rest now. You have run your race well." Death is not an ending for the child of God. It is a transition, a doorway, a homecoming. And every sign you have learned in this script is heaven's way of saying, "I am closer than you think." Whether your day is near or far, whether you feel these signs now or someday later, may your spirit always be ready, always listening, always anchored in eternity. And now, before we close, I want to pray with you. I want us to step into the presence of God together, to release fear, to embrace peace, and to let heaven speak to our hearts. If you're ready, if your spirit is open, come pray with me. Father, we come before you in the quiet of this moment, with hearts open, spirits trembling, and souls lifted toward heaven's light. We come not with fear, not with dread, not with anxiety about the unknown, but with a holy reverence for the God who writes every breath and holds every heartbeat. We come acknowledging that life and death sit in your hands, and there is no hour, no moment, no crossing that escapes your sovereignty. So we bow before you now, asking for your presence to settle over us like a soft mantle of peace, asking for your voice to steady our trembling places, asking for your spirit to whisper truth into the deepest corners of our being. Lord, for every person who feels heaven drawing near, cover them with a peace that surpasses anything they have ever known. Let a holy calm drape over their minds. Let rest settle into their bones. Let a serenity greater than words embrace them in the night and steady them in the day. If their season is shifting, if their journey is nearing a threshold, let your presence be felt more clearly than their own breath. Let them know they are not walking toward darkness, but toward light itself. Let them sense that to leave this world is not to vanish, but to step into the fullness of the world they were created for. For every soul releasing burdens, lifting old wounds to heaven, letting go of bitterness, fear, regret, and sorrow, God, breathe healing into their release. Let the lifting feel gentle. Let the cleansing feel holy. Let their heart feel lighter than it has felt in years. Let forgiveness wash over them like warm oil. Let healing flow through memories that once hurt to touch. Let their spirit unwind every knot it held. Let their inner world exhale decades of weight in a single holy moment. And let them know that release is not loss. It is preparation. For those sensing your presence in stronger, deeper ways, especially in silence. Lord, let your nearness become their comfort. Let them feel you not just around them, but within them. Let the quiet become a sanctuary rather than an echo. Let their breath sync with heaven's rhythm. Let their hearts lean into the whisper of eternity. And if your presence grows heavier, more radiant, more undeniable, let them recognize it not as a warning, but as a welcome. You are drawing them, not to frighten them, but to fold them into everlasting arms. For every heart beginning to see life differently, beginning to loosen its grip on earthly things, beginning to value eternity more than the temporary. Father, bless that shift. Let their new clarity feel like revelation. Let their eyes see what truly matters. Let their spirit feel the pull of home. And let them walk the last stretch of their journey with purpose, with love, with gratitude, and with a deep awareness that everything they release makes room for everything you are preparing. For every person feeling the call to reconcile, to bless, to speak truth, to pour wisdom into loved ones before their departure, Lord, empower their words. Let their voice carry healing. Let their presence carry grace. Let every conversation become a seed planted in the hearts of those they leave behind. Let their final blessings become anchors for generations. Let their final words become lamps for those who will walk after them. For every soul who senses angels near, Father, remove fear. Let them feel guarded. Let them feel accompanied. Let them feel escorted, not abandoned. Let them understand that heaven sends help when transitions draw near, and that the presence they feel is a sign of honor, not danger. Let their room feel wrapped in holiness. Let their nights feel watched. Let their spirit feel safe. For those receiving dreams, visions, impressions of heaven, God, let these glimpses comfort them. Let them taste the joy, the color, the music, the beauty of what awaits. Let fear dissolve in the face of glory. Let their vision shift from the fading world to the everlasting one. Let every glimpse become assurance. Let every assurance become peace. For every person stepping close to eternity, Lord, prepare their spirit gently. Prepare their heart fully. Prepare their soul beautifully. Let the veil thin in a way that does not frighten, but fascinates. Let their final moments be wrapped in glory, guided by angels, orchestrated by your love. Let them cross over not with confusion, but with certainty. Let them walk into eternity like someone stepping into a familiar home. And for every family touched by this script, every loved one who must watch the transition of someone dear, God, cover them with supernatural strength. Let their grief be carried by your hand. Let their tears be held by your compassion. Let their memories become sacred. Let their hearts feel the nearness of heaven, even in loss. And let the assurance of eternity rest on them like a crown. Lord, we dedicate every reader, every listener, every seeker, every wanderer into your hands. Wrap them in peace. Surround them with angels. Speak to them in quiet places. Hold them close when fear rises. Prepare them tenderly if their time draws near. And if their journey is not yet done, then strengthen them for what remains. We end this prayer with the same assurance we began with. Life and death are not enemies in your kingdom. They are both passages into your presence. And whether we rise on earth tomorrow or awaken in eternity tonight, we are yours, fully, completely, eternally. Amen. Thank you for being part of this beautiful community. If this message has touched your spirit, type Amen in the comments, and don't forget to share it to uplift others. Stay blessed in Christ.